dramatic twist in the football abuse scandal. A paedophile at the centre of the allegations is found unconscious. Barry Burnell is tonight in hospital as claims grow of a cover-up and calls grow for a government inquiry.
I weren't brave at the time, but I'm sort of feel braver now, right? Because everyone else is coming out. If anything's happened to you, please step forward.
Also tonight, UKIP's latest leader, the third in 3 months, says he's after Labour voters.
Queuing for Castro, tens of thousands wait to pay their respects to Cuba's revolutionary leader. And
I'm the type of person, I get nervous before my first race. I really do.
The fastest man on earth tells us why he still has bouts of self-doubt.
This is the ITV Evening News with Mark Austin and Ranveer Singh.
good evening. The paedophile at the centre of the football abuse scandal is tonight in hospital after he was found unconscious and not breathing. Police say the former youth coach, Barry Burnell, suffered what they describe as a welfare incident at a hotel in Stevenage on Friday. He is currently out of jail on licence.
The 62-year-old has previously been in prison for a string of sexual assaults on young boys whilst he was at clubs including Crewe, Alexandra and Manchester City. Today, a senior MP called for a judge-led inquiry into the abuse as a fifth police force said it was investigating fresh allegations. Our sports editor Steve Scott has more.
Very little is known about what happened to Barry Burnell. He was found unconscious on Friday night at an address in Stevenage. Police say they were called to a fear for welfare incident. He was taken to hospital and has been there ever since. Ian Ackley was one of many boys repeatedly abused by Burnell. At the time, his father Frank tried to shame football into improving the protection of young players. The replies he got from the Football Association, the Players' Union and others expressed no regret at what had happened to his son. Cheshire Police even got Ian's name wrong.
The response was quite frankly pathetic, and how he must have felt. He must have felt crushed, quite frankly.
How do you feel looking at that?
I haven't seen these letters for a long time. Yeah, it upsets me. It upsets me a lot. It shouldn't have been that way, and it shouldn't happen.
But privately, the FA, for one, did think football was failing. In a letter to the then Home Secretary, its chief executive wrote, "I cannot express strongly enough the support of the Football Association for the introduction of legislation in this area as soon as possible," adding later, "A further area of particular concern is scouts. These individuals may well fall outside the FA's area of influence." 20 years on, and the FA has announced an inquiry into the growing scandal, investigating who knew what and when. But already critics are concerned it won't spread wide enough, and they also question its independence given the barrister, Kate Gallifant, appointed to head it up.
The QC who's been chosen to lead this internal review is someone who's worked for the FA before. Her chambers do a lot of work for the Football Association, so therefore is this someone who is independent enough?
Whatever the eventual makeup or the depth of the inquiry, those who were largely ignored all those years ago are, it appears, finally being listened to. Steve Scott, ITV News.
Former footballer Jan Nowacki thinks he may have been Barry Burnell's first victim. He was invited to spend the night at the football coach's home when he was 13 years old. He told ITV News he feels terrible and said if he'd spoken out at the time, Burnell might have been stopped.
I was obviously shocked, over the treatment I was getting that night. I couldn't understand why it was me there and why he was doing it. And after it all ended, that following day, I headed off home, and then it was going through my mind all the time. I weren't brave at the time, but I'm sort of feel braver now, right? Because everyone else is coming out. If anything's happened to you, please step forward and tell your story. Because if it isn't Barry Burnell's, it could be somebody else that's abusing everybody and getting away with it now.
Well, our sports editor Steve Scott joins me now. Steve, yet more upsetting testimony there, which just presumably piles the pressure on the FA to get this inquiry right.
Yeah, absolutely, Mark. I mean, every day it seems, ever since Andy Woodward came out the week before last and told his story, more and more testimony emerges about what happened to all these young men when they were playing football. As youngsters, the scandal continues to grow. In the last hour, Greater Manchester Police announced it was now investigating historical cases of sex abuse among youngsters playing football. They're the fifth force now involved in this. The FA, for them, well, they'll be slightly disappointed tonight, I think, about the criticism that already come their way about who they've chosen as lead counsel for their inquiry. Also questions, of course, about the scale of this inquiry. Will it be wide enough? Should it be a government-backed inquiry, so much bigger than they have in mind? And the makeup is so important, of course, because we know what's happened at the independent inquiry into child sex abuse and the mess that's got into with the makeup. They don't want a repetition of that. It's important that the FA gets this right. It's important for their reputation, of course, but it's important for the victims and very important, obviously, for those playing football at the moment. I suppose one small crumb of comfort today is the fact that they've set that up. Then the victims that have been emerging bravely over the last couple of weeks, at least now know they are being listened to and something is being done.
All right, Steve, thanks very much indeed for that. And later in the programme, we'll be looking at whether legislation has made children today safer than they were 20 years ago.
UKIP elected Paul Nuttall as its new leader today. The 39-year-old MEP, who's a former history lecturer, overwhelmingly beat his main challenger after a turbulent few months for the party. The last leader only stayed in the job for 18 days.
Paul Nuttall says he wants to make UKIP the official opposition to the government and will do that by targeting disenchanted Labour voters and Tories who feel betrayed after the Brexit vote. Our political correspondent Libby Vina assesses his chances.
A landslide victory, but among a rump of 15,000 members. Paul Nuttall has his work cut out, rebuilding the party he now leads. Nigel Farage promised he'd leave him to it, saying he didn't want to be a backseat driver. But remember this woman, Diane James, elected 2 months ago to the same job. Well, she lasted just over a fortnight. Mr Nuttall has bolder plans.
My ambition is not insignificant. I want to replace the Labour Party and make UKIP the patriotic voice of working people.
The new leader is a northerner. Born in Bootle on Merseyside, he's 39 years old and used to be a university lecturer. He was elected as an MEP for the North West in 2009, going on to become the party's deputy leader. Controversially, he once backed privatising parts of the NHS and reintroducing the death penalty for child killers. But what about claims UKIP's rhetoric sparked the rise in hate crime after the EU referendum?
There are people coming from the Middle East and North Africa in biblical proportions to the continent.
That intemperate language, the sort of language that is dangerous.
But it is of biblical proportions. You know, there are literally millions of people making their way onto the continent of Europe at the moment.
One Labour backbencher says the threat from UKIP over immigration is one his party needs to take seriously.
There's no doubt that the UKIP fox is in our Labour henhouse, so we've got to address that. We can't be complacent about it, and I think we must take this moment to think about the big challenges that the country face and work out what our response to it is.
Labour defectors to UKIP in towns such as Bolton believe Mr Nuttall is someone who'll help the party win big.
We now are going to kind of get the centre of gravity more towards the north, and I think that the north is got the greatest potential for growing the party.
There's no way I would vote Labour again now. You know, they live in a bubble.
It's a bubble that Mr Nuttall believes he can burst. So is it really possible that Nigel Farage is now yesterday's man? Well, Paul Nuttall must certainly hope so. He says that the biggest problem the party has had over recent months is disunity, and he's the man to fix it. He's also shifting away from targeting Tory voters in the south to targeting Labour voters in the north.
Libby, thank you very much indeed.
Brexit was high on the agenda during a visit by the Polish Prime Minister to Downing Street today. Beata Szydło said she hoped negotiations would result in positive results for both the UK and the EU, including guarantees for Polish citizens living here. Theresa May said she wanted both countries to become even closer allies, but scotched ideas that Brexit was causing her to lose sleep.
I think there's been a bit of over-interpretation about sleepless Brexit nights, I have to say. But of course, it is a challenge. It's a very complex negotiation that we will be going through. Yes, there will be aspects where we're members of things because we're in the European Union, which we'll need to consider in the negotiations that go ahead.
Well, our political editor, Robert Peston, was at that press conference and joins us from Westminster this evening. Robert, any closer then are we to knowing what Brexit will really look like?
Well, apart from being reassured that the Prime Minister is getting enough sleep, we learned two useful things. First, that contentious issue of the future of European Union citizens, including 900,000 Poles living in the UK and Brits living in the rest of the EU, may well be settled more or less at the time that we start negotiating our exit from the EU in March, because we're already seeing Theresa May having negotiations about this issue with other government heads, and today she agreed with the Polish Prime Minister that they would both press for Brits and Poles to be given the certainty that they can stay where they live now as soon as possible. And secondly, we learned that the Prime Minister is really going to play hardball when it comes to those formal Brexit negotiations. I asked her, for example, whether the UK's fearsome intelligence expertise, our military capability, would be bargaining chips as she tried to get the best deal out of the rest of the European Union. Of course, the rest of the European Union wants access to intelligence at a time when terrorism remains a clear and present danger, and she did not deny that those would be bargaining chips, and my goodness, people will think that is serious hardball.
Indeed. Robert Peston, thank you.
In America, at least 8 people were taken to hospital today after a gun and knife attack at Ohio State University. Officials say most people injured in the attack are stable, but one was listed as in a critical condition. Police say one suspect was killed. The university confirmed the campus, one of the largest in the US, is now secure.
Rebels in the Syrian city of Aleppo appear to have suffered their biggest military defeat for 4 years. Over the weekend, government forces say they have seized several key districts as part of an all-out assault to recapture it.
This map shows the area controlled by rebel forces in the east of the city on Friday last week. Well, over the weekend and today, government advances have effectively cut the rebel area in half. The Kurds have also taken some more territory, and thousands of people have reportedly fled. Our correspondent Dan Rivers has the very latest on the battle for Aleppo.
They have been besieged for 4 years, but now thousands of civilians are pouring out of East Aleppo as the Syrian government makes huge advances. Many were loaded onto government buses, Syrian state television showing jubilant scenes. But the truth is many will be fearful about what will happen next under a regime notorious for arbitrary detention, torture and disappearances. Those that crossed over to the government side know anything less than fulsome support for President Assad could be a death sentence. Over the weekend, it's reported some 10,000 made it through the front lines as rebel fighters retreated under heavy fire. The scale of the rebel losses is staggering. The Hanano district is among the approximately 40% of their territory in East Aleppo that's now been overrun.
All people are worried about what's going on, about what will happen next. Now we are in very, a small area, and it's dense with people. And now I think we will be an easy target for the planes, for the shells.
Among those fleeing, 7-year-old Bana Alabed, who's become an emblem of suffering in East Aleppo. This weekend, tweets sent by her mother Fatima in her name said, "Tonight we have no house, it's bombed, and I got in rubble, I saw deaths, I almost died." Then, last message, under heavy bombardments now, can't be alive anymore. When we die, we keep talking for 200,000 still inside. And then a final message: we're on the run, as many people killed right now in heavy bombardments. We're fighting for our lives, still with you. Tonight, the internet has been cut to many in the dwindling rebel-held enclave. A doctor managed to send these images this afternoon of the Al-Shah district as he fled with his daughter under his arm. But as fuel and food runs out, he and thousands of others are running out of places to hide as the fall of Aleppo looks inevitable. Dan Rivers, ITV News.
Tens of thousands of Cubans have been queuing since the early hours of the morning to pay tribute to their former leader, Fidel Castro. The ashes of the 90-year-old who died on Friday have been taken to Revolution Square in the capital, Havana, for a two-day ceremony. The whole country is observing 9 days of mourning, with schools and government offices closed and many workers given time off to attend. From Havana, here's our correspondent, Carl Dinnan.
From before dawn, Cubans queued around Havana's Revolution Square, the scene of many of Fidel Castro's most stirring speeches. At 9 a.m, the distant rumble of a 21-gun salute, marking the beginning of the public commemorations.
Thousands have gathered here since early morning to come and pay their final respects to the man they knew as El Comandante. A dictator he may have been, but he was also loved here by many.
The Castro family had requested his ashes not now be moved here until tomorrow's mass commemoration. So instead, people filed past his photograph and his medals. Afterwards, many were overcome with emotion.
Cambió mi vida.
He changed my life, said this man. I have learned a lot from him, not to live only for money. That's what he teaches us, that we can help others.
Para nosotros significa.
For us, he's the biggest thing in the world, said another. I consider him the chief person in all humanity. Why? Because of what he has done for all societies. When Castro came to power in 1959, overthrowing a right-wing dictatorship, he built health and education systems. He supported revolutionary struggles around the world and famously stood against the United States, a source of great pride to his supporters. When many in other countries are celebrating his death, we are celebrating too, but we are celebrating our pride in being Cuban. We are celebrating our happiness to have had a comandante like Fidel. The mourners were largely from older generations. It is a decade since Castro left power. But amongst the younger people here was 25-year-old Gretel Gonzalez, a student who had come with her father.
Do you think Cuba is a better place because of Fidel Castro?
Yes, of course. It's a very, very good place.
Do you have all the freedom you need?
Yes.
But not everyone feels that way. Guillermo Perez did not go to pay his respects. A lot of things are bad here, he says. There is a lot of oppression of young people. There is a lot of oppression. Castro is a polarizing figure too on the international stage. Cuba's South American allies will send presidents and leaders to the commemorations. Britain's official involvement will be limited to a Foreign Office minister. Carl Dinnan, ITV News, Havana.
The historical abuse scandal gripping football has raised concerns over whether children currently playing the game are safe. Those involved at grassroots level say there is more protection than ever before, but as our sports correspondent Ian Payne reports, there are warnings that authorities and society can never be complacent.
It's another busy day at Windsor United Football Club near Southampton. A scene repeated by thousands all across the country, with the parents as involved as the children. So what have these families made of last week's horrific revelations?
It's shocking, but you know, things over the years, it's not surprising, I'd say. But you know, it's not something we worry about.
I'm a trainee teacher. If a child came forward, they would be believed, and it would be something would happen. It would be carried forward, and there would be an investigation. Whereas in the past, I'm fairly sure that wasn't the case.
Approximately 4 million children and young people, that's those under the age of 18, are involved in football in England. Since 1997, those working for the FA have been required to have DBS checks, formerly known as CRB checks. And the FA say more than 35,000 people go through safeguarding training each year. Every club or league with under-18s must also have named and trained safeguarding officers. The legal advice, however, is that people mustn't become complacent.
It would be a very dangerous mindset to have, to think, oh, we know about it now, we've sorted it out, everything is fine. Everything is not fine. There's always new generations coming through, there's always new people, and there's always new risks.
Although this football club's safeguarding officer is convinced the problem's being tackled.
What is going on now, is we have a really good, robust system in place, in my humble opinion, for somebody who's been working in grassroots football as a volunteer and a paid employee for a considerable amount of time.
It's not perfect, but the system is protecting these youngsters now a lot more than it did. Ian Payne, ITV News, Hampshire.
Prosecutors say there will be no criminal charges over the death of 13-month-old Poppy Worthington. The toddler collapsed and died, if you remember, with serious injuries at a home in Barrow-in-Furness 4 years ago. A family court judge ruled earlier this year that Poppy's father, Paul Worthington, probably sexually assaulted her before her death. He denies any wrongdoing, and now, after a review of the evidence, the Crown Prosecution Service says the decision not to charge him was correct.
Southern rail drivers have voted overwhelmingly to strike in a dispute over driver-only trains. 87% of ASLEF union members backed a walkout, the first of which will start next Tuesday.
And there were warnings today that the cost of your Christmas dinner will be affected by the falling pound. The ingredients of Christmas puddings have risen by 21% on last year, but turkey and vegetable prices are broadly the same.
Now, he may be the fastest man on earth and one of the most successful Olympians ever, but it seems even Usain Bolt has self-doubt. Speaking as a new film about his life is released, he admits he continually questions whether he's good enough.
Really? Usain's parents, who also take part in the movie, say life with the sprint star hasn't always been easy. His father had to keep him in line, and his mother just wants one more thing, as Nina Nanar reports.
It may look like life for him is a breeze, but Usain Bolt wants the world to know that in reality, it's been blood, sweat and tears.
People just see me winning easy and they say, oh, this is easy, I probably could do it, you know what I mean? But they never see the background work that I put in.
And on the way to his historic 9th medal at this year's Rio Olympics, Bolt reveals in a new documentary the doubts and insecurities that plague even the fastest man on earth. I
train well, I execute well in training, but I always worry, am I still fast? Am I still the fastest man in the world? Am I still this great Usain Bolt?
Why don't you just finish it now and go take the world? Why wait till next year? Why wait till the World Championship?
I think this is mainly for the fans, because if I'd stop running, they would die, you know what I mean? And because they've always said, oh no, don't retire. So this season is really more for my fans than anything else.
And chief amongst his fans are his parents in Jamaica. His dad in particular credited with keeping the young Usain in line.
He's always calling me, making sure I'm going to training and checking in on me. My mom is more laid back.
Watching their son's progress has not always been easy, say his parents.
I'm the one that really, the stern father, and you know, when he does anything wrong, I reprimand him a lot because I want him to grow up in the way we as parents think he should be. And he just get off track at school, and I really have to spunk him for that.
They're proud of their son, but his mum wants one more thing.
I try to, talk with him, telling him that when I think it's time for him to settle down, but...
You want grandkids, yeah?
Yes, we do.
They're waiting for grandchildren. He's waiting, he says, for his beloved Manchester United to call and offer him a job. In the meantime, at the premiere tonight for his new film, settling down did not seem much on his mind. Usain Bolt, supreme athlete, and now movie star. Nina Nanar, ITV News.
Doesn't look like he has self-doubts to me.
No. Well, finally tonight, for many, retirement is a time to enjoy the golden years and to relax after years of hard work, but not for one 89-year-old from Paignton in Devon. Joe Bartley is so fed up of being stuck at home, he's put an advert in the local newspaper asking for a job.
Good man. the former World War II veteran, says he's looking for something to do for 20 hours a week to stop him dying of boredom.
Sound familiar, Mark?
What do you mean by that? No, that'll be me next year, yeah.
There'll be a paper round in it for you, I'm sure. Someone will give you something.
Thanks very much, yeah.
Julie's here with news at 10.
But from all the team, the evening news team, have a very good night. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.